Hey everybody, this is Wolf Den Podcast, episode 4, and we got a big one for you this week. I'm joined by my friend Frenchy, I'm your host Ottoman, and we're going to get right into it. So we had Bad Batch episode 12, I believe. Was it 12, Frenchy?
I believe it was 12, yeah.
Yeah, and this has been the talk of the internet for the past week. We finally got a really big episode. So before we get into anything like we always do, we're going to do just a general rating, not even talk about anything. So I honestly gave this episode a solid 8 out of 10. It's hard to give anything ever a perfect score, but definitely 8, or maybe probably even pushing 9 out of 10, really. We saw some major plot developments. The fandom as a whole, we predicted the HOWZER thing, again, and that was great. And it'll be interesting to see where he goes, and HOWZER was the big talk this week, not even the whole episode, just HOWZER, right? But Frenchie, what was your general rating of the episode before we dive in?
So mine's a little lower than yours, not by much. I'd give it probably a solid 7. And that's mainly just because, we got a lot of we got a lot of developments. But I feel like, yet again, Filoni, he's leaving us with more questions than answers, and until we know if he's gonna fill those questions, I might change the rating at a later time. You know what I mean? But I feel like a solid 7 because he's doing that thing where he leaves more questions than answers every episode.
Right. So let's get into that then. Let's see what we got answered. And what questions remain. So what do you got for us, Frenchie?
So first off, I want to bring up, pretty much right off the rip, Hera, towards the beginning of the episode, calls Bad Batch Omega directly, actually. And for the first time, really, you kind of see Hunter's, I don't want to say Imperial side, but his more just caring about the squad kind of approach. He's kind of like, well, we can't save everybody. It is what it is, Omega. We just gotta kind of go on. And she brings up, well, isn't it what soldiers do is help people in need, kind of deal? And he's kind of like torn between going back to Ryloth and just kind of going on about his day as being a smuggler, bounty hunter, or whatever the hell he decides to be paid for that day. So it's kind of interesting to see him change like that so quickly. I think we've seen it a little bit throughout the series so far. Back on Corellia, and a little bit when he leaves Omega behind to go to the Separatist stronghold, and then obviously we saw it again in this episode. I don't know. I feel like they're changing Hunter. I don't know if I'm correct in that assumption or if it's just my eyes assuming things, but it seems like they're changing Hunter to be more squad based and not really caring. But then at the same time, kind of tying into, what is it, Squad 99, the Imperial version of Clone Force 99. If they do go that route, then it would make sense for Hunter to starting to change to only caring about the squad, because that's what the Imperials want. So I don't think that was the purpose, but that's kind of what I got out of that. I don't know if you saw anything about it, or if you were just like, oh, Hunter's just not trying to waste time.
Well, yeah, I got the vibe that like you said, it's not about the bigger picture anymore. It's he has definitely been more accepting of his role as just a mercenary, right? Because he sees the bigger situation that's going on. So yeah, it is interesting that he needed a little bit of convincing to get back in, to the freedom fight. Echo, we haven't really seen much of Echo, right? But he was always the one saying we're soldiers. What else what else is there other than soldiering? It's debatable of whether or not, being a mercenary fills that need to be, or that niche of being a soldier, even if they were contracted as like security contractors or whatever the case is. Right now they're just doing odd jobs, like you said, whether it's smuggling, arms dealing. Um, so yeah, it was interesting that he needed a little bit of convincing from Omega that you guys are soldiers and this is what soldiers do. And I think he got a little bit of the taste of it's like the old days, even though it really hasn't even been that long. It's crazy to call it the old days, but we're seeing the galaxy change rapidly as we know it was under the Tarkin Doctrine. The Empire was very swift.
It was a very swift takeover.
Yeah, and I mean they had since Palpatine had been setting everything up, so everything was ready, set to go. Like chain codes, it was all pre-planned. We already had an army as an occupying force, which is the clones.
Yep.
So yeah, rapid changing galaxy.
Right,
yeah, rapid changing galaxy. Bad Batch has been on the wrong end of things, keeping their heads low. So yeah, I definitely agree that seeing him needing some convincing to get back into the fight, the good fight, was interesting.
Yeah, and not to jump to the like end of the episode or anything, but when Cham Syndulla brings up, it's gonna be a fight for everybody, and Hunter kind of like shoves it off like, no, all I care about is my squad. Hera's mother, I can't remember her name, she ends up saying, it's gonna be everybody's fight, including yours. And I feel like he's not accepting that. So it'll be interesting to see where he goes further into the remaining 4 episodes for sure. And I definitely think there's going to be a season 2. The way they're drawing this out, I definitely think there's going to be a season 2 for sure. But yeah, it's just interesting like how he went from like for the Republic, we're soldiers, this is what we do. To basically, if you're not a part of Bad Batch, I don't really care. Like, sucks to suck kind of deal.
For sure, yeah, that might have been a little bit of foreshadowing because it seems like the end of the episodes we get a foreshadowing for the next episode or what's going on in the series. So that might have been the little nod to, even if he's not recognizing it, that that she was right and that it will become their fight whether they want it to or not in some shape or form.
Yeah. And then that kind of leads me to the second thing I want to talk about, and that's HOWZER. The big talk since he came to us in episode 11. He was like the big talk, like, oh, he is a real character. It's not just some toy that was made up. No, he is a real character, and you saw it in episode 11. He kind of isn't really on board with the whole Imperial doctrine of like, the clones are there as a force to put down rebellion after they've fought alongside the Twi'leks this whole time. And then, like, you see it even more in this episode. Like, everything that Rampart tells HOWZER, he has some kind of defense against it. Like, if we arrest every single citizen that is suspected to be a freedom fighter, we're going to have a rebellion on our hands. And Rampart kind of just shrugs it off like, okay, and your point? And HOWZER, like, does not like that at all. And then on top of that, when he goes to see Cham in the holding cell, and they kind of blame HOWZER, like, for Hera being on the run and then being captured. And I find that weird because they fought together, or so we believe that they fought together. We're not really sure when HOWZER came into the picture on Ryloth, if it was before or after the separatist occupation. I'm assuming it was during. But yeah, you see Cham kind of shrug him off like, no, I don't accept you anymore. Like, we were friends and you betrayed that, but HOWZER never betrayed it. And you kind of see that later on when he helps them escape, or well, when he helps them escape the planet. But he even tells them, like, I'm trying to protect Hera, because if Crosshair and his Special Forces squad find her, it's game over. So it was interesting to see HOWZER develop more, and then at the same time, you see the Twi'leks relationship kind of fade off with Howzer almost, but he kind of rekindles it at the end. But it's just interesting to see how much Howzer is in defiance of the Empire. Um, and then you can kind of I'll let you bring up the main point of him defying the Empire. I'll let you talk about that.
Yeah, so my theory with the chips is, like, you and I were split on this. Because it seems like most of the people believe that when the chips activated during Order 66, that it then dictated all of the clones' behavior afterwards, and I've been split on that, right? I believe that the reason why they were grunts, just sort of mindless drones, was because that they were bitter after seeing what they did because they couldn't control themselves, right? So the theory with HOWZER is that maybe his chip has worn off, and that the other clones that joined him were also like-minded, meaning that their chips wore off, so that now they've sort of regained their free will, as we saw in the Clone Wars. Because I mean, we know that the clones would obey any order without question, but I mean, take the Umbara arc for example. Like they'll do what they have to do, but they won't. I mean, but they'll question it.
Yeah.
So are we seeing? So the question for me is, what are we seeing? Are we seeing the clones sort of becoming free of their inhibitor chip? Because that would mean that the inhibitor chip was indeed making them more like droids. Or were they always that free will, but just not brave enough to speak up? Right? They saw what was going on. I think.
Right.
I think the chip theory does gain validity when all the troopers were cheering at Palpatine's speech. I don't think. I mean, normal troopers would do that because they're soldiers of the Republic. They all are like-minded in that. So I'm starting to see where the theory of the chips controlling every aspect of them gaining validity. It's just like I said, I like to point back to the mess hall scene. Like, I feel like if they were totally under control, they wouldn't even really have the ability to joke around. They just go, they eat, they sleep, they do what they need to do. But I mean, maybe that's not the case. I don't know. So now with the chip thing, right? So now I saw on another Star Wars channel, I forget what it was called, has Crosshair's chip possibly been damaged or deactivated? And where that stems from is also HOWZER's speech, right? Like, why didn't Crosshair just say kill them all? We've seen what he's done in the past. He's definitely
To his own squad.
Kill his own squad, kill civilians. He's definitely capable of such actions. But he opted to arrest them. He didn't shoot HOWZER. Just interesting, and of course that could be nothing, right? Like that could be just character preservation. I don't know. That could be nothing, but it's something to look at. But part of that YouTuber's theory was also that maybe, I mean, this is pretty batshit, but they're like, oh, like what if you scaled down the ion engine to not be so damaging, like how Crosshair was? Like, what if you were able to scale it down, and then you could, so it's not so damaging to their actual like bodies, to deactivate chips on like a massive scale? I'm like, that's a stretch. But I think
that's a big stretch.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely possible. We saw in this episode the damage to the right side of Crosshair's head, whether that was all from the ion engine or due to his conditioning. But there didn't seem to be a wound on his opposite side. So is he coming off the chips because of his wound, or are we seeing him also be subject to the same decay as HOWZER?
Yeah. I'll just kind of elaborate and bounce off of what you were saying. So I've been this whole time I've been thinking that the chips have controlled their actions, and then you bring up the mess hall scene, and I agree with you on that. But this episode, I feel like I've been wrong this whole time. I don't think the chips have been necessarily controlling their actions, because my thought process is Howzer probably never executed Order 66, right? There was probably no Jedi on Ryloth at the time. I
That's actually
highly
a
doubt
great
it.
point. You and I didn't talk about that. Maybe he was never given that order and just had always maintained his uh,
Right.
individuality. That's a great point. I haven't.
So
Wow.
I think that is more caveat into why his armor is still painted. And then I think because he controls a squad on Ryloth, he doesn't control the entire. So I looked into it. I still don't know his actual battalion, but it's called the Ryloth Battalion. Like in the Imperial archives, it's the Ryloth Battalion. So he controls a squad within that battalion, and I believe the squad is the soldiers that dropped their weapons when he gave his speech. And then I think the rest of them, and it's just my thought process and theory. I think the rest of them have been transferred there with Rampart, which would make sense on why they didn't also agree and keep their individuality. Also, like I said, it's a bit of a stretch, but I'm assuming they aren't all originally from the stationing of Ryloth. I'm assuming some of them got transferred there, because by the end of the Clone Wars, I doubt they had such a high military presence as what we see in the Bad Batch. They have a whole battalion there. I don't think that would have been the case with so much conflict going on after they've secured Ryloth. I don't think they would have left that much military presence with so many other conflicts going on in the Outer Rim. So I think I 100% think that HOWZER just never got the order. And even if his inhibitor chip was activated, I think, like you said, it's wearing off. I don't think it's a permanent thing. And I think that's also why they're trying to phase out the clones, because they've served their purpose. They got rid of the Jedi. That was the whole reason they were created, basically. And then also to elaborate on the crosshair thing about him coming off his chip, is it the damage or is it also fading off? Because if you remember in the Clone Wars, Bad Batch, they kind of followed their own orders more or less. They didn't really care about rank structure. They basically went off of what Hunter said, and that's what it was. Um, and then, like you said, we've seen what Crosshair can do. He's killed his own squad. He's killed civilians without hesitation. So why arrest the traitorous clones, as he called them? And then at the very end of the episode, when he's talking to Rampart, you kind of see in his face, and it might be nothing, but his facial expressions, they change. He goes from like a sly smirk, like he's excited that he's going to hunt the Bad Batch, but after Rampart passes him, he has almost like a relieved face, like he's awake, like he knows what he's doing now. So did them enhancing the chip break, break the chip basically? Like, did it break itself, or was the damage from the ion engine what did it? But I don't know. I guess time will tell, for sure. And then I also wanted to bring up, bouncing away from HOWZER and Crosshair and the clones, I wanted to bring up Hera, just Hera for a second. So we know she's a great pilot in Rebels. Like, we see she's an amazing pilot in Rebels. She can fly anything. She flies the Ghost. She flies Imperial ships. She's the only person that can fly the B-wing. When they get the prototype, um, we get to see her fly for the first time, and I mean she's a little rusty at first, but she picks it up really quick, and we kind of see Omega. She kind of hops right in, and she knows exactly what she's doing at the same time. So it'll be interesting to see if they keep anything with that arc going, if they're going to bring more rebellion into the Bad Batch, or if they're going to do more episodes like we saw in episode 11, where Bad Batch gets a cameo and that's about it. Like, you don't really see them for an entire episode. It'd be interesting to see. And then this is my last thing I want to bring up. Are we going to see any more bounty hunters come after Omega? before the season's over, or is that arc kind of over?
Yeah, that's another good point. Um, so we've got 4 episodes left. Again, assuming that the last episode, possibly the last 2 episodes, could be pretty long. If they weren't planning on doing a second season, they'd really have to be. Um, so at some point, we're gonna have to reach the apex of what's going on here. Which could be so. I mean, the next episode is called Infestation. And then the one after that's called War Mantle, and then the other two have yet to be announced. So War Mantle, I think we would probably start to see some of the new human recruits coming in. Infestation, I don't know what the heck that could mean. It kind of sounds like a side mission, honestly. Unless they're speaking to, it could be a couple things. Maybe they're using the inhibitor chips as a metaphor for an infestation. Maybe, the Empire sees rebels as an infestation, so maybe they're talking about like, ugh, like we've got a bunch of defective clones now. What are we gonna do? Get rid of them all, and I mean that maybe that could make sense because then that would set up for War Mantle. Like, okay, you just got rid of a ton of clones. We need troopers now. So if your theory is correct that Crosshair wants to rejoin them somehow, and then say, look, I can't rejoin you straight up because I'm on the inside. So the best way I can help is to help from the inside. So we could see him possibly starting the Camino Rebellion.
Yeah.
And then maybe Omega gets captured again, brought back to Camino. So it sort of comes full circle. Like maybe that's how they plan to come full circle is Omega gets captured and successfully brought back to Camino. Crosshair needs to go back to Camino to not only help get Omega, but start some sort of rebellion. Then the Bad Batch swoops in, helps with the rebellion, blah, blah, blah. And then the rebellion, as we know in canon, fails, and then they just leave for good, and Crosshair sacrifices himself. Like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like if they were going to come full circle, then the bounty hunters would probably have to be still relevant. That's probably my best guess. I mean, if anything, like that warning we got at the end with this fight's going to become everyone's. So what do they do? Do they join the rebellion, or do they help the Camino Rebellion?
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see for sure because we have the Rebels series. We obviously have the movies. Obviously, Bad Batch wasn't thought of during any of that time, but it'll be interesting to see what they do with the Bad Batch because of that to keep canonization of everything. Will the Bad Batch kind of disappear? Will we see them kind of blend in with maybe they become part of Saul Guerrero's force? And by the time you see Saul Guerrero's force, they could be anybody because they don't have to keep their armor. Like, who says they have to keep their clone armor? You know what I mean? So, and Saul Guerrero has like 1,000 freedom fighters under him by the time of what is it, Rogue One? So, I mean, anything's possible. It's definitely going to be a lot of keeping a close eye in each episode because every episode so far, Filoni does an amazing job at dropping hints and keeping us out of the loop. He really does a good job at that.
There's only so much we can predict. Like we predicted the thing with Wrecker. We could see the pattern with Howzer. But like you said, with every answer is at least another question, if not 2 more questions. And even if us as a community all do a good job at predicting a good portion of the series, we can only predict so much, right? And it seems like I mean, what really came of the Wrecker thing? Nothing. So it happened, and it was, I think, designed to keep our focus on that. Everyone's talking about like what's going to happen to Wrecker, when really it's like, yeah, it was a little thing, a little battle. They took it out, and it's nothing. But then and then you miss other foreshadowing, as a little bit of a distraction. So maybe that could have been the HOWZER thing. Do we see more HOWZER, or was that the sort of just cool thing that was thrown in there to help with foreshadowing of something completely different?
And it's funny you bring up the record thing because it made me think about HOWZER actually. So at the end of that episode, when Rex leaves, he says there's more like him, more like them. And then what? Four episodes later, we see Hauser. So was Rex's quote foreshadowing us seeing Hauser?
Yeah, I think it definitely was. I think the question is, did Rex was Rex in league with Hauser?
Right.
Because we know Rex reached out to Cut. So Rex was probably trying to figure out if there was anyone else. Going through his list of contacts, I know that he wouldn't want to just abandon his brothers straight up, right off the bat. Um, he'd want to see if there was anyone else worth saving, or if, and maybe he came in contact with Hauser. So
Yeah, and it'll be interesting if we see Cody at all in the Bad Batch because there's talks of him being in the Kenobi series. So it'd be interesting because in Legends, I don't know if it's canon, I forget, but I know in Legends, Cody becomes a trainer at the Camino facilities for recruits, not just clones, but civilians too for the Project War Mantle. So, do we see Cody in the Bad Batch, and do we see him kind of see the Bad Batch for one last time, possibly during the Communal Rebellion or something like that?
yeah, or see Rex. I mean, since we do have that one episode coming up called War Mantle, it's definitely possible that we see Cody.
Yeah, because I mean, like I said, I don't remember if it's canon, but I know in Legends he is a trainer on the Camino facility. So, do we see that, or does that get brought up later, or does it stay Legends? But obviously, if the Kenobi theory or rumor is true, um, which I think it'd be cool to see, if it is true and that's how they play it, as like that's his purpose, uh, do we get to see a glimpse of that in the Bad Batch before the Kenobi series? Because I feel like it'd be cool to see more Clone Wars characters as along with new characters. And then also, this is the last thing I'm going to bring up. Hera's mother. So they leave Ryloth together. So at this point, we know she's alive. So do they follow any more of the Ryloth arc? And do we see how she dies? Or do we just get well, by the time of Rebels, she's dead? Because if you remember, Thrawn sets up his base camp in the old Syndulla house. And he has their family heirloom. I can't remember what it's called, but it shows on there um, that her mother's dead, and also we see in this episode that when Omega calls Bad Batch her brothers, Hera kind of says, she shows a little sadness, and she says, "Brothers must be nice," because she had a brother, but he died very young. For those of
Yeah,
you that didn't know, that is a
yeah,
thing, and it shows it on that relic that in Rebels, and Thrawn even brings it up.
yeah.
Um,
And I don't think in Rebels they ever specify how Hera's mom dies.
I don't think they do, so that's why I was curious if they show how she dies or
Yeah,
not.
yeah. Same thing with Hauser too. Like how many, or with Rex, like with how Rex faded into the fog. Was that just sort of that's what you see of him? Because now we know the rest of his story in Rebels. Um,
Right.
or does he come back? So is Hauser gone? Is Hera's mom gone? Um, is it all going to come full circle? Um, Eventually with one big battle, or are we going to get a season two? I'm really not sure. I think there's a lot of potential here to be, for them to have a season two because they just seem to be setting up a lot more again questions than answers.
Right.
With the sort of slow burn that we've been getting, and then every couple episodes we get like a good leap forward. And I hope we get a season two.
Yeah. This series has been very enjoyable, so I'd hate to see it end in one season.
Yeah, and
But
since
Disney has been on like a roll lately of one season shows. Now, granted, this is Filoni's doing, but Disney Plus in general has been on a roll with one season shows, and then kind of just rush ending them. I don't think that's going to be the case. I hope there is a season 2 because I would like to see this continue. And they have a lot of time until the Death Star, so they have a lot of time to set up to connect everything from the Clone Wars into the rise of the Empire into by the time the Death Star explodes. Obviously, they don't have to go that far, but I'm just saying they have that time that they can fill in gaps and canonize things that a lot of us from the fandom would love to see canonized.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, they have a lot of room to do a lot of things, and Filoni, now being the head creator at LucasArts, he's passionate. He's proved his passion. I think he's going to put in a good word at Disney Plus for why they should continue the series. I mean, they don't have any reason not to. If Disney wants a more money, more money grabs, then giving us what we want is is the solution, right?
Yeah, because I
Like
mean,
Filoni is really good at fan service. He's been giving us exactly what we want. I mean, we're like the fans are practically writing the content at this point. Uh,
yeah, I feel like he has a secret Instagram and he just like follows a bunch of Star Wars pages and watches all of our feed and he's like, okay, this is how we're making the next episode.
he's in yeah, like the Mandalorians on Facebook and all of that probably.
Yeah, and then like speaking of Disney Plus and the Mandalorian, so when Disney Plus first launched, its sales skyrocketed the second Mandalorian dropped, which is funny because, like you said, if you want a good money grab, keep producing the content that we want to see. And 90% of people pay for Disney Plus for things like Mandalorian, The Clone Wars, Bad Batch, Rebels. So, I mean, it would be dumb for them to do one season. If they end it right, sure. But regardless, I'm definitely going to go back through and watch again. Because, I mean, it's been how many years since the Clone Wars came out, and I still go back to season 1 and watch.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'll still watch episode 1 and and go back through, and I've got to watch it all again with my dad because I'm gonna have to get him up to date on everything because it's like if you want to watch The Mandalorian, you have to watch the Clone Wars, right? Like
Yeah.
you need to know who these. You need to know like you need to have that bond with like Ahsoka, or else she's just like a nobody character.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to know why. And then you need to watch Rogue One because when Jyn Erso is going through all the projects like Project Black Saber, Omega something, War Mantle, like all those little hints, and then again it's like, oh, so you gotta watch Clone Wars before you watch Mandalorian, Rogue One before you watch Bad Batch, and of course you can't watch Bad Batch without Clone Wars, of course. And then you need to watch Rebels before you watch Bad Batch.
And I kind of feel like you need to watch Rebels before you watch Mandalorian as well, because of the Ahsoka, at least season 2.
Well, yeah, Ahsoka. Yeah, of course Ahsoka, but also Bo-Katan. You need to know. You need to understand Bo-Katan. You need to see the Mandalorian Wars and stuff like that.
Yeah, and then
Siege
like
of Mandalore.
When she brings up Thrawn, you're gonna be like, Thrawn's legends.
Right? Yeah, you're gonna. Well, and you might not even know who Thrawn is, and then especially, good point. Like in Mandalorian, unless you know who Ahsoka is, and then why, like, who's Commander or where's Grand Admiral Thrawn, and then you'd be wondering, number one, who is Thrawn and why is she looking for Thrawn?
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, I give it a solid 7 because of all the new questions that I now need answered. Filoni, stop doing this to me. But yeah, I think the episode was very not cut and dry, but it was very to the point. Hey, not all the clones are mindless robots.
Yep, which definitely could lead up to that could definitely be foreshadowing the Camino Rebellion.
Yep, and then also you see Hunter, you see Hunter kind of questioning helping others, which the rebellion is pretty much founded on, is helping each other and themselves. and then you kind of see, the Twi'leks kind of going underground and leaving, especially the Syndulas, which are, since the Clone Wars have been freedom fighters. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they continue forward. I hope they keep bringing in more Legends things and more things that we just want to see more content of, as far as, from Rebels and from the Clone Wars and things of that nature. Just kind of tie in the universe, because the universe is so big. Star Wars has so much like Legends and canon that there's just so many gaps and plot holes that could easily be filled with these shows. And Filoni just keeps making more plot holes, and then he fills them.
And Star Wars is just so good as TV, right?
Yes.
People are even arguing that it should have just always been like after the original trilogies, right? Like so 1, 2, 3, like so 1 through 6, it should have just always been TV, and then the anthologies. I mean, Rogue One and Solo. I mean, like we loved those side movies. But as far as trying to fill in like bigger things, yeah, the Clone Wars. Like we don't really want another movie for between episode 2 and episode 3. We got a whole 7-season thing to fill that in. And
it didn't just show, the main Clone Wars. It showed everything that was happening out in the galaxy besides that. Like Maul taking over Mandalore, Maul starting his underground syndicate.
Which is huge.
Yeah, like the things that if we got a movie, we would have never seen. We would have never seen those things in a movie.
Yeah,
it would have been cut and dry. More clones fighting droids.
Yeah, and how many battles you're gonna fit into a movie?
Maybe 2.
And you're not gonna be able to convey what the clones went through.
Right. But I think it's a good wrap up point, because we're starting to just kind of gander off into the distance here.
Here goes the tangent. Yeah. So definitely we got episode 13 coming up called Infestation, and then after that we got War Mantle. In the meantime, thanks for listening if you did. Frenchy's still going on with his Empire War series, so make sure to check that out. We're going to be starting a Rome 2 Total War series as well here very soon, a head-to-head over on his channel, so we'll leave the link there in the description for more content in between the podcasts. But other than that, until next time, this has been Wolf Den Podcast.
Signing off.